There is a creature alive today who has survived millions of years of evolution without change, without passion, and without logic. It lives to kill. A mindless eating machine. It will attack and devour anything. It is as if God created the devil and gave him jaws.
Hello, welcome to the Damian and Devlin show, and this is our review of Jaws, the 1975 thriller directed by Steven Spielberg and starring Roy Scheider, Robert Shaw, and Richard Dreyfuss. Yes. And of course, this is the movie that started it all off. This was the official blockbuster movie that got people, you know, when you see summer movie season, and nowadays there's so many big name movies that come out, this was the movie that got people lining up around the block. It's the movie that got people back into theaters, but why not? Nobody's going to that beach this year after this movie came out. Of course, Jaws is based on a very popular book that was written by Peter Benchley. Never read the book, but I heard it's a little bit different, and the movie actually took it to places it didn't. This, of course, is Steven Spielberg, one of his first films. He did do a couple of other little films. I think he did a TV movie called Duel and another movie called Sugarland Express. But this was the first movie, and even Spielberg, when you see interviews about this, he thought this might have been his last movie because he had so many problems with it. But somehow he managed to take this little movie, which I think cost about $6 million, and that was over budget at the time. And it became an international blockbuster and a game changer in so many ways. No matter what you think about it, you got to realize its cultural value because it just changed the way filmmaking is. I chose this movie. It's one of my all-time favorites, and Damian had seen it before, so what is your take on when I suggested we watch Jaws?
So, those of you that remember, when we first started this channel, we talked about movies that we could potentially review, Jaws being one of them. And I made reference to the fact that, you know what, I thought Jaws was a little overrated. So, rewatching this in its entirety, now, just so you know, I'd never actually seen the movie in its entirety before. I'd seen bits and pieces, and I was like, it's nothing to scoff at.
Oh, this was your first time seeing it?
This is the first time seeing it all in one. It's nothing to scoff at, bits and pieces. I was like, okay, yeah, cool, whatever. But seeing it for the first time, you know, I've got some interesting thoughts about it, but I guess you'll have to see what I think about it. Do I stand by my still? Is it overrated? Maybe a little bit, but I guess you'll see. You'll get a little bit of a feel of how I feel about this movie as we go on, but yeah, we'll find out.
Now, Steven Spielberg, of course, has gone on to become one of our biggest directors of all time. Saving Private Ryan, Jurassic Park, Raiders of the Lost Ark, just so many, and all different styles. But Jaws was really the movie that really found that creative niche. He learned storytelling. And again, if you see interviews of Spielberg, he was playing against so many different odds. One, filming on the ocean, he found out really, there was, like, people told him, don't do it. The water is just not a place to film. He did it anyhow, and it was horrible. They had a mechanical shark that kept breaking down to the point that the shark was supposed to be featured in the movie a lot more. It didn't, and Spielberg says that he doesn't think the movie would have been the same if that shark was seen so much. So again, all these things accidentally happen. He even managed to get a shooting star in the back of a scene, which you gotta admit, everything was lined up for it to be a success, even though it looked like this was going to be the end. Like, he really thought he was never going to work again. And yeah, and this set the stage. Like, now we get shark movies all the time, but back then this was the first real, like they did monster movies, but this was the first real movie to deal with sharks. And even though, now we learn that sharks maybe aren't as quite as aggressive as this, it still doesn't change the impact of this movie. So, your positives of Jaws, if you have any.
If I have it, just because I think it's a little overrated doesn't mean I don't have any positives. I do have positives, one being, I think the fact that the shark isn't seen a lot in the movie is definitely a big one. You made mention to it. It adds terror to the movie, and I think that's very true. There's a lot of things you don't actually see in this movie, and it gets your imagination going. That's the whole point of the magic of the movies. Leave your mind to do the nitty-gritty dirty work of what is actually under the sea. What does that body look like? So on and so forth. I think that's a really good thing. That modern movies, they show too much, and it's to the point where we're desensitized to it. Like, you look at a movie like Alien, you barely ever see the alien until like the very end, and even then you're not seeing the whole alien, and that's what adds to the horror. And I think it works very, very well with Jaws. The fact that you don't see the shark, you see glimpses of the fin on the water, you see glimpses of it swimming under people. That's brilliant, and I think it really, really works. Performances by the top three actors that we mentioned: Richard Dreyfuss, Robert Shaw, and
Roy
Scheider. Thank you. They're all brilliant, and I love the dynamic that the three of them have, especially near the end on the boat. Which leads me to my next positive. The whole sequence when the three of those guys go out on the boat is absolutely wonderful. It takes about half of the movie, I would say, on the boat when they hunt for the shark, and I think that's the best part of the movie. There aren't a lot of other things that happen that I'm really a big fan of in the movie. I'll touch on that in a little bit, but I definitely love the sequence where they're on the boat. Quint, which is Robert Shaw's character, is just absolutely awesome. He's such a badass. He tells this awesome story about how when he was on the USS Enterprise and they were delivering the bomb to
Indianapolis, isn't it?
That's it. The USS
it wasn't in Star Trek.
No. The Enterprise was actually another aircraft carrier.
Oh, was it?
World War
Okay.
II that had problems. But yeah, it was the Indianapolis that delivered the bomb to like the Hiroshima bomb, and then they got torpedoed by the Japanese submariners. And then just the story he tells of him sitting in the water with his fellow sailors and whatnot, it's awesome. Like, you can tell, it was like he was actually there. Like, I don't know if he was actually a Navy veteran in real life, but like, the way he tells it is just awesome. I find it hilarious as well that the guy's like practically drunk the entire movie.
Yeah.
Like, he says, you don't even know what he's saying.
I think he was actually drunk. From the documentaries I've seen, I think he did come on
He's
set.
just like blabbering nonsense half the movie, and then like, he gets serious when he's talking about this, and then he is just a badass. Like, the dude's getting like in situations where every other person would give up, and he's still going at it. So he's an awesome character. I really, really like Richard Dreyfuss's character. I think he's actually my favorite. So just the performance overall. There are some really cool shots, and it was accidental. Like, we were watching the movie, and that shooting star that he just mentioned, it just happens. I was like, is that real? Like,
I believe it is.
Was that CGI?
No, I believe it is.
So if that's a legit shooting star, because it happens in two different scenes, so it could have been a meteor shower for all we know in that time period. But it's just awesome, and it adds to it. My favorite scene. So overall, my favorite part of the movie is when they're on the boat. But my favorite scene is probably the best scene, the best well-known scene from this movie is when the shark comes out of the water for a second, and dude goes and backs up and says, "You're gonna need a bigger boat." Like, that is just awesome. That scene is so cool. It's iconic, and it one of the most iconic lines as well. You're gonna need a bigger boat. Like, so cool. Like, I love it. I love it. Soundtrack as well. John Williams. You said it was one of his first.
One of his first, definitely with Spielberg, and of course they still work together. And he's in his 80s now, and he's contributed to pretty much most of. I think
John Williams. Yeah. So obviously the iconic "dun dun dun" came from this movie, and everybody knows that theme. So you got to know that this is definitely a culturally impactful movie, because it stands the test of time with the theme, the story, so on and so forth. And people still, even kids these days, going off of their parents' tales of Jaws, that's how they view sharks. So even kids these days still think sharks are these beasts that are just going to relentlessly hunt them because their parents were scared by this film. Even though it's not the truth, and we're learning more and more about sharks as time goes on, but still, that's how big of an impact this movie has. So awesome stuff.
And continuing on with my positives, with the impact, you still see parts of Jaws that are used in other films. Not only camera techniques, but even storyline techniques. I love that they don't really deal with it a lot, and I kind of like that because I think not only do they have a subtlety with the amount that they use the shark, and that was accidental because they just couldn't get the damn mechanical shark Bruce to work. A little trivia for you. Yeah, his name was Bruce. I think it was... I believe it was Spielberg's lawyer, and they named it after him because he wasn't a big fan of lawyers. Something like that.
He's a shark. Goes for blood.
But like one of the things I love about this is Roy Scheider's family actually moves from New York to this more peaceful place because he's tired of all the crime in New York, and he's faced with this huge dilemma, and he kind of deals with it as trying to be like a New York guy, but hating the water and everything just doesn't make it very good at all. The dynamic between the people are absolutely phenomenal. Like, even the little relationships at the beginning, like with his wife, and it's a lovely moment that he has with his son, where he's just had a horrible day, and he doesn't even realize that his son is like copying everything he's doing. I don't know if that was part of the script or if it came naturally, but it's such a beautiful moment when Roy Scheider realizes, my son's like totally copying me, and then he plays around with it. It's such a sweet, sweet moment. And just little things like even the small times you see him and his wife, lovely moments, because you realize this is a tight-knit family who think they're just here. This is a nicer place to live, and then they're thrown into this. But the three lead actors, when they do go on the hunt, that's when the movie really picks up. And
yes.
The camaraderie between the three, and they all bring so much to it. You've got this New York cop who doesn't like water, doesn't like sharks, wants nothing to do with that. Then you've got Quint, who's like, I'm all experienced. I've caught many sharks in my time. I've done this. I do it old school, and you're going to do the way I do it. Then you have Matt Hooper, who's like this oceanographer who basically has all the cage, and I've got tracking devices and all the modern things, and how they all stand by what they do. But it's not until almost desperate moments that they're like, okay, what can you do now? And I love that it's the dynamic between them works so good because you see the moments where they actually start respecting the other character, even though you can see they're driving themselves crazy when they're on that tiny boat. But then there's moments you can see when the respect comes in, and it's like, okay, well, what can you do with this and stuff? I think the script is amazing, and I think Spielberg doesn't give himself enough credit. I think he gets a lot of great shots. For somebody who we know, like now we can look back at Spielberg, and he's given us so many iconic moments in movies. But as I said, this is one of his first films, and some of the shots he gets are absolutely great, even though, some he admits were accidental. He's got to give credit that he was definitely an ingenue that was really skilled with a camera.
What? Sorry?
Like an ingenue, like a...
A what?
Ingenue.
I've never heard that word before.
Yeah, it's a word that kind of means like a he's
an entrepreneur.
No, it's an ingenue. It's an actual word. I just can't think of the meaning. It's
All
like
right.
You're special before your time kind of thing. But I don't think he gives himself enough credits. But you can see bits of other movies that he eventually does, and you can see that Jaws is the starting of a lot of that. And it's a great, one of his first movies to see. John Williams' score, you touched on it. That music, who's not swimming in a lake and suddenly in your head you think, and I remember, not an appropriate story, but I remember the first time I ever slept on a waterbed, I always pictured that poster with me being at the top of the bed, and I couldn't sleep because every time I felt the emotions, I'd hear da 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 da. It's freaked me out. I could not sleep on that waterbed. There's a 70s story for you.
Yeah, waterbeds.
Yes.
Horrible idea.
And no, they actually were pretty kind of neat.
They're pretty bad.
They had moments. But there's also like some jaunty sea stuff that I love because it reminds us that yes, it's a tense film, but it's also there's an adventure feel to it. We're going on an adventure and we have no clue how it's going to play out. So I like to give that. I love the scares in this because they're, again, because we've seen so much now, they probably don't come off as scary. But I remember a couple of years ago, I showed this to somebody who had never seen it before. And there's one particular scare that I won't give away. It's probably the biggest scare in the whole thing and involves a boat. And I remember watching it with this person and seeing if the scare still works. And they actually jumped. And I go,
it works.
Still, and that scene was actually paid for by Spielberg. That was not in the original script. He felt it needed a scene that added a little something, but Universal said, we have already gone over budget on this and we're not giving it to you. So he literally shot that scene, I believe, somewhere in a swimming pool using stuff to make the water look nighttime murky. And the scene is phenomenal, and the fact that Spielberg knew he needed one more scene that just would get audiences, and it's in some, if you're seeing Jaws and you think of the scene that scared you most, that's probably the one we're talking about.
Yeah, probably. It got me the first time I ever saw it. But
this is not one I saw on the big screen until a lot later in life, so I actually saw the edited on TV with commercials, and it still freaked me out. And I can't speak enough of this. Your negatives, because you'll have more than me.
So I totally disagree with you with regards to just the sweet moments he has with his son and his wife, like Brody and with his son and his wife. I think those are so forgettable characters. Like, I forgot that he even had a family at one point. That's how forgettable they are. You can shake your head all you want.
That's right. You're allowed your opinion.
They are just so forgettable. Like, I don't even care that they're there. That's just how bad they are. Like, forgettable characters left, right, and center. And just talk about cartoon characters as well when it comes to the mayor. Like, goodness gracious, just add a freaking mustache onto him and throw a bag of money, and there you go.
So that's the real villain of Jaws.
Well, that's great, but he's still a forgettable cartoon character.
Yeah, you need to, when you watch movies like this, you have to remember, he's an ass, but he also, it's a tourist town, and this is the only time they make money. Yes, he's a villain. Go on.
It doesn't
You
matter.
just have to see things, you got to see things from different angles than just one.
I take things at every single angle to be as unbiased as possible, but he is just ridiculously forgettable. It's not unbelievable. It's accurate. They're forgettable. You know what? Even I'm going to go so far as to say the entire first half of the movie is absolute garbage. I think it's boring. It drags on too much. Sure, there are important things there to set up this story, like the attack at the beginning of the movie and then the attack on the kid later on the beach. But after that, like when they're at home and things like that, I don't care. Like, they're just boring, forgettable. It just drags it on forever and ever. Like I said, when they get onto the boat and actually go out to hunt the shark, that's when things start to pick up. That's when it gets awesome. It's on the edge of your seat. It's awesome with the character development and dynamics, and as well as the soundtrack during that whole experience. But the first half, forget about it. And then there's actually a blooper I picked up. Like
There's a lot of bloopers.
This is the most prominent one that I picked up, watching it for the first time the entire way through. So at the very beginning of the movie, there's a shark attack. And then they bring in Richard Dreyfuss's character, the oceanographer. He's checking out the body. And he very clearly states that the head, the torso, and the left arm fully intact. But the right arm has been severed above the elbow. Then they pick up that severed right arm, which is clearly a left arm. And I was like, what the heck is this? Like, how can you make that mistake? It's a left arm that you have severed. So that kind of pulled me out of the movie as well. Now, you mentioned that there are other bloopers left, right, and center.
There's a lot.
I didn't notice that many other bloopers. But those...
Because the movie was so good.
It was decent for the second half, but the first half is just so hard to swallow. Now, this is nothing against the movie, but me as a child, I had seen the first half of the movie. I hadn't seen the second half of the movie till I was an adult. But the first half of the movie actually really disturbed me as a kid, because this was the first movie I'd actually seen a kid die in a movie before.
But that's garbage, because that was the first half of the movie.
So I like how when you have negatives of movies towards me, you're allowed to go off on them.
Okay, go ahead.
But you always just throw your little nitpicks in there whenever I have
Nitpicks,
something.
A great film.
Nah, it's debatable. But that actually really disturbed me as a child, to see another child get viciously attacked by a shark. And it kind of actually, no word of a lie, is one of the reasons why I hadn't seen it in its entirety until now. And like I said, I'd seen bits and pieces of it all throughout my life. So it actually really does a great job of showing you that it is a devastating attack, because it's another kid and I'd never seen that before. Even I felt the mother of that child that got attacked forgettable. Like, I was expecting a grieving mother, and here she comes, she's got her black veil on and things like, give me a break. You walk from your funeral just to tell somebody, oh, my kid's dead. Like, no, you need to be grieving. You've just lost your only child. So those are my negatives, and I stand by them resolutely.
Oh, am I allowed to talk now?
Absolutely.
I don't have a lot of negatives with this movie. I look at things from a different time. Things were dealt with differently then. I like the first half of the movie. I think you need to have some kind of storyline. You can't just jump in and be action, 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 action. You gotta care for the characters before they can. I don't think you could have got to the fishing thing without learning more about Roy Scheider's character and his obsession. Like, he becomes obsessed with this shark because he cares so much about people that he doesn't even know. And the fact that he has so much empathy for it, I just think it's important for it. I don't have any real negatives. I could go on about there are moments that the shark does look somewhat fake, but again, they were playing with a lot, and I think of the time. To be honest with you, they've made so many shark movies now where the CGI is so awful. I will take a bad-looking mechanical shark in close-ups better than any other thing. So
I actually don't think the shark's bad looking at all. I think it's pretty good. The mechanical prop is actually pretty effective, if you ask me.
Well, that's the only thing. There were just times that I just thought that they could have held back on the shark, but as I said, it's not really a negative. A lot of people say, how come they make so many shark films but nothing can come close to Jaws? It's because they aren't really watching Jaws, because they're concentrating on the second half of Jaws, and so they make this movie that's all action, but they lose the beginning, and that's the reason why.
You realize there are non-action parts in the second half of the movie that are awesome.
Absolutely, absolutely. But because they're on the water, there's always tension. And they can be attacked at any time. When they're on land, that shark's not going to show up and go, hello!
No, because there was tension on the beach as well. Like, nobody wanted to go in the water.
Yes, there was, and I felt it. You
so
obviously
did it.
That
doesn't matter. Like, your point is moot then.
Yeah, okay, so I don't have a point, so I'm done with my negatives. My
right.
points don't mean anything, I've just been told.
That's not true at all, but...
You said my point is mute. I did interrupt you, and I apologize for that. But I did let you finish. You did not let me finish, so we're done.
We're done.
Your points.
All right.
5 stars, I might as well say it. I like this movie, and if you're a movie fan and want to consider yourself a movie fan, you got to at least watch it, whether you like it or not. Hopefully you catch some things in it that you realize how important it is. He seems to get that at least.
I do get it. It is an important movie, and definitely one that you should watch at some point in your life. Definitely a must. This is not a recommended, check it out if you can. You have to watch Jaws. You have to see it. It is iconic. It is important if you like movies. As for me, I'm not going to give it a 5 because, as you've heard, it's not a perfect movie by my stance at all. I'll give it a 3.5. It has its moments. It's really good for the second half. The first half, it could be a lot better. And just the forgettable characters. So 3.5 for me. Still a very, very, very good movie overall. But that is our review of Jaws. Now, before you go, next week we got some really big, exciting news. It is Fan Appreciation Month all throughout July. It's all about you. Believe it or not, this movie, Jaws, was actually a recommendation. So kind of Fan Appreciation Month a little bit early. Do you know the name of the woman that recommended this movie?
I can't remember. I do know I think it was a gentleman, and he
Gentleman,
made a comment.
wrong.
I can't remember who it was. I almost want to say it might be Robert.
Okay.
All I know is that he told me to flick your ear because you called Jaws overrated. So hopefully he gets to watch this and see what he really thought.
Well, thank you for recommending it, whoever it was. We do appreciate it. It definitely made for an entertaining review at the very least. But that's what July is going to be all about. You guys are going to recommend movies that we watch. Maybe we will agree on them, maybe we won't to this extent. You never know. But stay tuned. It's going to be a lot of fun, and it's going to be completely your choice. We're also going to be doing a Q&A.
Yeah, send your questions about movies or anything you really want, and we will answer them in a special video. I don't know when we'll drop that, but it'll be closer probably to the end of the thing. We also have another interesting thing. I think we should be able to talk about it. We are going to be releasing all these reviews as podcasts. So if you don't want to see our beautiful faces, you can take us with you anywhere. Download them. It'll be a free download, and you'll be able to get it on iTunes and maybe a couple other places, and you can listen to us fight or agree or whatever we're doing that week, and you can take us with you. And it's perfect for traveling, going to work, coming back to work, or just lounging around listening to us.
Absolutely.
So lots of exciting stuff coming up in July.
For sure, and we'll throw those links up there along with our Facebook and Twitter account as well. Thank you so much for taking this voyage with us. Were you on my side? Did you think it was an okay film, better in the second, not so great in the first, or were you an absolute fanatic like Devlin? Let us know in the comments.
And most of the world.
Okay, see, there's the nitpicks coming in again, but let us know. We always love to have you. Like, comment, subscribe, guys. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Roy Scheider, Robert Shaw, Richard Dreyfuss, Jaws. See it before you go swimming.